Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us, the mothership, where you'll find our Civil Liberties blog, which has got links to all sorts of organizations actively working to ensure folks' constitutional, civil and natural-born rights. We've got a kind of a pop-up show tonight. It's the outgrowth of kind of an intriguing, ongoing conversation I've had with this gentleman for the last couple of days. He is a frequent offender on this show. He's been here as a call-in guest, as a live guest, and someday hope that when we restore society, he will be an in-studio guest. Of course, I'm talking about the candidate for the vice presidential nomination of the Libertarian Party for your United States. I think we're supposed to cue. What do they cue for the vice president when they come in? Do they have a song? Is there like a gig? Is there a beat? Of course, I'm talking about Spike Cohen. Spike, welcome back to the Coalition.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I know they have "Hail to the Chief" for president. I don't know, "Hail to the Chief's friend" who will fill in if something happens to him. I'm sure there's a song, but I don't know it.
Well, here we channel two very special in-studio guests who are with us here in the bunker, high above Providence, the naked city, the city of about 300,000 stories, are two of the philosophers that have led me to this point in life. And, of course, I'm talking about Dick Cheney and Spiro Agnew. So we regularly channel the great vice presidents of all time here at the Coalition Talk Radio. They are seminal parts of our core philosophy, particularly Spiro Agnew. He's a personal hero of mine, as he should be any vice presidential candidate. Is there a vice president, by the way, that you look to that has struck your fancy as a sort of an historic role model?
Probably not Dick Cheney, I will say that. I think if there were going to be one, I'm saying this as an anarcho-capitalist, I guess maybe Calvin Coolidge was the one who grew government the least during his tenure, at least in the modern era. Other than that, if there's one who died shortly after getting elected, maybe him. But yeah, other than that, I'm kind of drawing a blank here.
Well, I want you to know that one of the ongoing, off and on libertarian initiatives in the great state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations has to do with the lieutenant governor's job. Now, here in Rhode Island, the lieutenant governor has little or no constitutional responsibilities. He's accorded about a $1.something million contract. He's allowed to hire 4 or 5 employees. So one of the early movers, if you will, of the libertarian movement in this state, a guy named Tony Jones, has done this. In the spirit of a gentleman named Bob Healy, who ran for governor of Rhode Island, got 23% of the vote while spending less than $100. And that is to run for the office and promise, as part of your campaign, to, if elected, not serve, to return all the money to the state and essentially work full-time as a volunteer to eliminate the position constitutionally. Have you thought about something like that for the vice presidency?
I mean, ultimately, that's what we're going to be advocating for, right? Like, I mean, what the goal is in my mind, for a proper, honest libertarian candidate. If you read our platform, the logical conclusion of applying our platform to government is that there should either be no government, or if there is a government, it should be a very, very tiny one that is voluntarily funded through voluntary fees for services, which, if it doesn't eliminate the need for a president and vice president, at the very least, it makes them a lot less important than they are now. So the purpose of vice president in particular, besides being, a tie-breaking vote in the Senate if it comes to that as the president of the Senate, it's really just a bully pulpit position, or obviously if something happens to the president, but it's really a bully pulpit position. It is a position to use the bully pulpit to try to influence the population towards your, prescribed policies and goals and values and desires for what you're trying to do. That is what I would do if I were to be elected vice president. I would use the bully pulpit to talk about the disruptive message that the Libertarian Party has, that you own yourself, you own your life, you own your body, you own your labor, and you own your property, and that no one should be able to take that from you, take any of those things from you, even if they call themselves government, even if they hang out in monolithic buildings all day long and write down on sheets of paper that they have the authority to take from you and put shiny pieces of metal on other people and order them to go order you around and rob from you. Once you strip away the pretext and the pretense and the pageantry of all of that, you're left with people whose actions are no different from that of any other violent thief. And as vice president, I would say that, and I would not accept a salary. I would probably not accept any kind of accommodations or anything like that. I would simply use the position whenever possible as a bully pulpit to kind of subvert corporate media and get straight to the American people and tell them that they own themselves and that this entire thing is a farce run by sociopaths and that we should be working to dismantle it.
Well, now, the current vice president certainly has used it as a bully pulpit. And if there's one thing that I walk away with clearly, and it's a bold statement, Cotton, is that I should not ever be in the room with another woman alone. I will take that to my grave, I think. But, other than that, what you're sounding certainly doesn't sound incremental, though. It doesn't. I mean, we're not talking about incremental disruption, are we, as libertarians?
No, I mean, so I would love to snap my fingers and make government go away. And we both know that's not possible. I mean, if that were possible, it would have already happened. At the same time, though, the idea that we should start by compromising is foolish. We have no real, all we have is our ability to communicate with others. And so we are in a position right now where we can spread our message that the reason the system is failing people isn't because there are specific politicians who need to be replaced with better politicians and that we have bad government that needs to be replaced with better government, but that the very structure of government itself is designed to give you bad services and to attract sociopathic people who want nothing but power and the ability to rule over you at your expense and to the betterment of themselves and their preferred cronies around them. That is the purpose of what we can do right now. And so can change happen incrementally? Yeah, that's usually how major change happens. But that's different than saying that we should sacrifice what we believe and our principles and be less than honest about what it is we actually believe. It's time right now for us to force the Republicans and the Democrats, or what others call the duopoly, force the Republicans to be on the defensive and to defend the system that they have 100% ownership of. Force them to defend that, to defend what it is they've done, what they've taken from you, and do it on a situational thing. Perfect example of what's going on with COVID. They botched the attempt to try to contain it, and now they're overcorrecting at the state level by telling everyone to stay in their houses forever. They're destroying the economy. It's arguable whether they're saving any lives or not. At some point, they're going to have to let us back out. The virus is going to just start spreading again. And so they're not really helping anything. They're just creating this massive amount of discord and chaos as a result of their failure. And the reason that failure exists isn't because they're uniquely bad politicians and we need good politicians. The nature of the state, the nature of government, is that it is a violent monopoly that is financed by theft and enforced with threats of violence and actual violence. They put people in cages and they rob people and they murder them. And they use these documents that they themselves signed that they say gives them the authority to do those things to us. There are two ways that you can get a service. One is through competing providers who compete with each other and cooperate with each other to try to provide you with the best value so that they get your business instead of someone else. And the other way to get it is through a monopoly. Well, government is a monopoly that has a gun to your head. And you're never going to get good services from that. You're going to get bad services from that. And if we say that message and we change the conversation on the national level and change it so that people are now going to their government not saying, I want this or I want that, but saying, I want you off my back, force them to be on the defensive, then yes, we might actually get some incremental change. If we go to them and say, well, you're doing 100% bad, so let's replace this tax with this kind of tax, and let's replace this spending with moderately less spending, and let's do this and let's do that, nothing's ever going to happen because we don't have a position to leverage for a negotiation. What we have is a very small party who right now is trying to sell itself as a moderate improvement over the current parties. Well, that makes no sense. If you're a voter and you've got two choices, one is a currently existing establishment party that doesn't really represent you but has a decent chance of winning the next election, and then another choice is a party that represents you a little bit more but has little to no chance of winning, you're going to keep voting for the first choice. You're going to keep voting Republican or Democrat, depending on where you skew on the political spectrum. You're you're not going to take that chance for a third party that has very little chance of winning if they're not providing you with a real option here. So the only way we're going to ever have incremental change is to affect the conversation, get people to vote for us, get people to join us, and move the cultural needle so that the people that are in power right now, until we can actually get in power, actually start to negotiate with us a little bit, because they have to, because we put them on the defensive. And then once we're actually getting in positions of power and actually getting in office, then we have a real way to make those changes. And they will more than likely be incremental, but not from the standpoint of, we shouldn't negotiate incrementally. We should negotiate for everything we want right now.
We don't negotiate with terrorists when it comes to international relationship. Why would we negotiate with terrorists when it's domestic? And I think it's high time. Exactly. And by the way, that's why we're calling this segment License to Ill, in deference to a mid-'80s, '90s seminal rock/rap group, that we gain nothing if we are, let me put it this way. In the business at ICARM, we have a saying, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. And unfortunately, at this moment in time, when we have the unique ability, I believe, to reach out and grab the American public, reach out and grab their imagination, what we're saying instead, some of the messages we're projecting are milquetoast. I'm not interested in milquetoast anymore. I'm of an age where I've witnessed 50-plus years of milquetoast. I've witnessed 50-plus years of working through the system, because we don't want to, as the great Rhode Islander Tony Jones says, we don't want to scare the squares. Enough.
Well, yeah, and it's in that 50 years' time. It's 49 years. It was started. The party was started in 1971. So we're talking 49 years. We're coming up on 50 years. In that time, we have won exactly 0 federal or statewide elections. We've never won the White House. We've never won a U.S. Senate. We've never won a U.S. House. We've never won a governor. We've never won attorney general. We've never won anything. The highest we've gotten is a handful of state legislative positions, and everything else has been at the regional and municipal level. And by the way, that is not because the people that have been working to get libertarians elected have done a bad job. They've done an amazing job, and they've done so with incredible headwinds against them, from the FEC all the way down to the state election boards and the ever-increasing requirements for petition drives for ballot access, and making it increasingly difficult with each election cycle for them to even get on the ballot. But it's worse than that. The reason that they haven't won is because they're not being allowed to share the actual message. And the few times that they have, they've done a lot better. But you're not going to be able to get the 90+% of voters who are, entrenched in the Republican and Democrat politics. You're not going to get them to stop holding their nose and voting for the lesser evil if you don't send the message to them that not only are neither of them lesser evils, but that the system itself isn't going to allow lesser evils, that it's only going to allow evil, and that you are presenting an opportunity to actually dismantle the system. We have to change the conversation, or it's never, ever, ever going to change. Not at the city level, not at the regional level, not at the state level, not at the federal level. And so now the answer that some in the party have is, well, if we get 5%, we're always hearing that, we need to get 5%. And some may wonder, well, what happens at 5%? We don't win at 5%. We don't get on the debate stage at 5%. What happens at 5%? Well, at 5%, we get a status with the FEC, with the Federal Election Commission, which allows us to get our presidential candidate to get matching federal funds for their election. And now it makes sense why some in the party don't want to say that taxation is theft. It turns out that taxation is the way that they want to fund their future elections. So they certainly don't want to send the message that they want to be massive hypocrites by taking money, stolen money. And so, unfortunately, this is where all of this comes from. It comes from, there are some in the party, and again, this isn't about individuals. This is about a prevailing mindset in the party that what we need to do is do government better than Republicans and Democrats. And I have news for them. They aren't better than the thousands or tens of thousands of people that have come before them. They're not uniquely virtuous individuals. Power corrupts. The system that collectivizes and centralizes a monopoly of violence in the government is going to corrupt you. If you're already finding yourself seeking federal funds before you've ever won a single election to secure your goals, I got news for you. Once you're in office, you're going to continue seeking federal funds to further your goals. And before you know it, you're just like the Republicans and the Democrats. We need a clean break from that.
Amen. Amen. What I want to do tonight is I want to try and reach out to folks and give them some type, reinstill, if you will, the fire in the belly. Here's what I mean by that. I'm fortunate enough on Fridays now to interact with emerging LP candidates, particularly folks who are running at the on what we call the down ballot. And clearly these are energized, dedicated individuals, folks who are, willing to sacrifice significant parts of their lives, make financial commitments. These folks are true patriots in the sense of looking back to the United States that rejected, quite frankly, a fraction of what we commit ourselves to every day. And they rejected issues that were a fraction of what we allow government to do to us. And so what I'm looking to do tonight is to try and restore the fire in the belly when it comes to the spiritual side of being a libertarian. What does it mean? Is it about half measures? It is about conversation and discussions and appealing to the powers to allow us to have a seat at the table? Or is it about reaching out and sort of grabbing it by the guts and saying, okay, this is why we demand access, and if you will not give it to us, we will effectively take it back. We need, as you pointed out, we need to become the aggressor. Let me give you an example. On the Second Amendment here in Rhode Island, which, interestingly enough, the state constitution is amongst the strictest pro-2A, pro-gun ownership constitution of any state in the nation. Yet, on a historical level, we continually retrench, we continually step back, we continually allow those rights to be taken from us.
Right.
My point is, let's not simply defend those rights that are left. Let's aggressively work to take those back that have been stolen from us. And whether that means human action, taking human action, whether that means simultaneously working within the legislature to develop allies to do that, whether that means removing ourselves from supporting the civic life that routinely steals from us, morally, financially, philosophically, and in terms of our rights. That's what we all have to do simultaneously. Life is too short. If we learn anything from this crisis that we find ourselves in, not only is it the inaction and the incompetence and the bumbling of the current bureaucracy, the current duopoly-driven government in place, it's the crucifixion, if you will, the destruction of the free market principles that were in place in the years leading up to this that exacerbated this entire situation. We understand that the virus, if you will, developed at some level organically. I'm not going to dwell on conspiracy theories here. But in the years leading up to, in the months preceding its emergence, and now in the handful of months post-crisis, government has done everything it can to make the situation dramatically worse, and people are dying. So at what point in time do we rise up and just say no more, no mas? Is it the time now? Or do we simply sit back and say, well, let's have a conversation? Because again, we don't want to, as my friend Tony Jones so aptly puts it, we don't want to scare the squares. Is it time now, Spike? Is this the moment?
I think, they say there's no time but the present. I think that, like you said, we are seeing all of the worst parts of government at once. We saw their complete and total ineptitude at trying to stop the virus when it got here. And by the way, it's worse than that. They actually actively stopped containment. So many people may not know this, but for the first 6 weeks, or at least 6 weeks that we know of that the virus was here and that there were people that were infected with it, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, was actively barring anyone from testing for it. They had this draconian system in place that if you wanted to test for a novel virus, you had to go through this application process that took months, meaning that if they were still using that process, we still wouldn't have any testing because it wouldn't be until June or July that anyone would actually get approved. And by then, we'd probably all have it if it continued spreading that way. And the people who were saying this knew it. They were medical professionals, but that's what it says on the sheet of paper. Sheet of paper says, got to go through this process, and it takes a long time. Thankfully, there were some doctors like Dr. Helen Chu and some others in California and Texas and in Boston who took their Hippocratic oath over the law. They said, I don't care what the regulation says. We have test kits. They've been readily available for a while. We have patients coming in who travel to Wuhan, China, and have the classic symptoms of this new disease, and we're going to test them. And they test them, and many of them came back positive, and they shared those results with the CDC, and the CDC said, destroy those tests, destroy those test results, destroy all the test kits you have, and tell no one. Instead, they released the results to let the American public know illegally that there were people here that had COVID already. As a result of that, and this is a perfect example of how you can force them with direct action to do not necessarily the right thing, but to do a better thing than they're currently doing, it forced the CDC to change their regulation. You still have to apply in order to test, but you can go ahead and start testing while your application is pending. That's how the testing even started. But we were so far behind the eight ball in being able to contain it that now it's spreading faster here than anywhere else. And now, to overcorrect for that, government is demonstrating their power to tell us that we can't leave our houses. Or if we do leave our houses, it's just to go to the store. And if it is to go to the store, it's only for a set period of time, and only a certain number of us are even allowed to go in the first place, and all of these other rules that they have in place. And a lot of them are arbitrary and stupid and do absolutely nothing to spread the virus, and in some cases actually make it spread faster. But overall, forcing everyone to stay in their homes, yeah, it will make the virus stop spreading. It also will, if it continues for several more weeks and months, it will cause mass homelessness. And I have news for you. According to Health and Human Services, homelessness has a fatality rate roughly 4 times higher than even the highest predictions for COVID-19. So they are creating conditions, and homeless people are more likely to get COVID-19 because they can't shelter in place when they don't have a shelter, and they can't socially distance when they can't, when they have to rely on many different people in order to be able to survive. So you've got a massive potential increase of homeless people, and right at a time when the food stores and food banks are closing because they don't want to infect people and they're running low on food. This is a situation that is going to create the conditions for a rebellion or the purge or mass raids on homes and businesses just for people trying to survive. People are not going to starve to death while you shelter in place. That is because of government putting their boot on the necks of all of us. And it has to change. We have to be disruptive. If we keep talking about making these small incremental changes and that we're the best parts of both the Republicans and the Democrats, and we're economically conservative and socially liberal, and this obviously uninspiring message that is not getting the 46% or anywhere from 40 to 50% of voters, of eligible voters who do not vote regularly. It's not inspiring them to vote, and it's not inspiring the nose holders in the two major parties who typically are just holding their nose and voting for the least evil option, quote unquote. It's not inspiring them to vote for us, and it's just making us look like we don't have any principles at best. Or if someone actually reads our platform and sees that we do have this radical divergent strategy of changing everything, but we won't say it, it makes us look like we're liars.
The need all of a sudden to become apologists for certain parts of government and certain parts of society in order to not offend anyone is astonishing to me. I'm going to read you a quote, and it's a little extreme. It was written, if you will, or spoken by essentially a guy named John Callahan. He was a cartoonist and writer for the Miami Herald in the 1980s. And it drives me, not because of the violence, because I embrace the nap, but the rhetorical and the mental, if you will, approach to ideas. I'm happiest when I'm offensive. I have a desire to tear people in half. I want to move people out of the suburbs of their mind. I want them to suffer, to feel something real. I have a lot of anger. I want to hurt people, at least a little. when it comes to the rhetoric that we need to employ, given the historical circumstances that we face right now, this is not an event for every 100 years. This is not an event for every 200 or 300 years. This has the real potential, given current attitudes, behaviors, laws, philosophies unchecked, to become a 1,000-year event. Do we have to actually just rip people from the suburbs of their minds? Is that what it's going to take for us to at least move the window to alter folks' perception of the role of government in their lives?
So I actually see it a little bit differently. I've gone around to housing projects and lower middle income communities. I've gone around to college campuses. And when I start talking to them about self-ownership, and I ask them about the things that are on their mind, and I start applying our principles to how I think that it could help them, I see people's eyes opening up. I see people getting very excited to hear more. I see people joining up to their local and state affiliates, libertarian affiliates, and following us on social media so they can find out more. We all innately know that something is wrong here. And the people who are in charge absolutely know something's wrong, and they've actually, they're leveraging it for their own cynical benefit. But the people, when you talk to them, and you let me give you a perfect example. I was at UNC Greensboro, which is a very left-leaning campus. Okay, it's a liberal arts campus, very left-leaning campus, and very diverse group of students. I'm sure that probably 70 to 80% of the people the students that are there that are voting are voting Democrat or Green Party or more than likely Democrat. And I went there, and I would open things by saying, do you think you own yourself? And then we'd have a conversation about what self-ownership was. And first of all, about 95% of them were interested in talking for at least a couple minutes, which I was actually surprised by. But that's actually been common, that when you start a conversation, they want to have it. But so I was talking to them, and then I would say, what's the biggest thing that you're worried about right now? And I'd say at least 90% of the time, probably much more, almost 100%. There were a handful that said something else. Almost all of them said student debt, my student loans. I'm worried about what happens when I graduate, and am I going to be able to get a job with the degree that I'm getting, and will I be able to pay for it? That was all they cared about. So it would make sense at first blush that if a politician offered to simply cancel their student loans or to give them money to help pay it off or whatever, that would appeal to them, because they're facing immediate instant poverty when they get out. And when they talk to their parents and grandparents, they're probably telling them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And when I was your age, I could work part-time and work my way through college. And then I bought a house back when it was, when both of those things were about 5 cents on the dollar for what they cost now. So they're not getting any kind of empathetic response when they're telling people about this, except from their peers and from cynical politicians who leverage their fear to grow government. So I talked to them about that, and I said, "Hey, listen, what is it? What are you majoring in?" And whatever they would tell me, I would say, "What, are you doing that just to get into a specific, career field?" And they'd say, most of them would say, "Yeah." And I would say, "Cool. So let me ask you something. If instead of having to be here for 4, 6, 8 years, what if during that time you could apprentice for that job and learn about it and sit basically at the feet of the people who are doing it and learn about things as they're coming in and do it for either little pay or no pay, but you're not having to pay to learn it. You're just maybe either working for free or you're getting a small stipend or something like that, but you're on the ground learning how to do it. And within a certain period of time, once you're certified that you're able to do it, you can start working." They lit up. They said, "Of course, that would be perfect. But I can't do that." And I said, "Why you can't do that?" And they said, "Why?" I said, "Because it's against the law." "Why is it against the law?" And they looked at me blankly, and I said, "Exactly. There's no reason for it to be against the law. Why is the politician who says that they care about you not telling you that? They know that." And we have a conversation about that. I didn't have to, beat them up or hurt them or anything else. And I know that there was some rhetoric there, some hyperbole there in your quote. But more often than not, when I'm talking to people, all I'm having to do is have an empathetic and congenial conversation with them about what matters to them, and then apply our principles to it. And then a light bulb, more often than not, goes off. And we had a ton of people that were signing up. We also had a ton of people that already knew who Vermin Supreme was and wanted to find out more about him before I even told them who I was. But that's a whole other subject when it comes to the kids at the colleges. But the bottom line is, and the same thing when I was at the housing project, They knew that the police were their biggest problem. They knew that occupational licensing was a problem. They knew that, the housing and food and free stuff that was robbed from them first and then given back to them if they decide that they need it, that it wasn't helping them. They knew all that. They wanted to get ahead. They just needed someone to give them a viable path to actually remove those barriers, and no one else is doing that. So that's all we need to do. Be honest about our principles, be radical about our principles, apply them in an empathetic, inspirational, and disruptive way, and watch the light bulbs go off in people's heads to understand what they already innately knew to be true deep down.
You visit a wide cross-section of campuses. You've gone to engineering schools, you've gone to liberal arts meccas, you've really spoken to kind of wide swath across student life. Do you find at this point that they're overly cynical? Do you think they're willing to make the leap, and what do we have to do to physically get them to make that leap where they actually will consider voting for a libertarian?
Kids are almost nihilistic. It's sad because in one way they're still kids, right? Like they still are carefree and happy in one way. In another way, they have no hope. It's really actually kind of sad talking to them because they're saying stuff that you don't usually hear a 20, 21, 22, 19-year-old talking about, saying, I'm never going to get out from under this debt. I mean, they're battling some very severe stuff. And again, another question I'd ask them, I'd say, have you talked with your older loved one, that have been loved ones that have been through this, grandparents and, parents and uncles and aunts. And they said, yeah. And very often the feedback they got was, well, when I was your age, it was, I worked my way through it and you can too. They have no idea, nor do they care, that they have voted for a system that has completely left this generation and future generations behind. And then they're shocked when these kids have no problem whatsoever voting for someone who promises to smash the entire system. Bernie Sanders, who's controlled opposition, who we all knew was going to endorse Biden or whoever the front runner was, that's his role, is to direct oppositional youth into an AstroTurf controlled opposition campaign so that he can then funnel them into whatever the establishment pick is. That's what his role is. That's like how the hardcore constitutionalists in the Republican Party, their goal is to bring in the Tea Partiers and filter them over to, root them over to whoever the establishment pick is. But the reason his message worked when he talks about, controlling capitalism and democratic socialism, they're fine with destroying the system, which, by the way, everyone, both Republicans and Democrats, agree on one thing. They want to call this system free market capitalism. Now, you and I both know it isn't, but the reason that they both agree with that is because they both want to talk about destroying capitalism, destroying the free market. We both know this isn't the free market, but they know that they're muddying the term free market and capitalism. They know that they're doing that, and they also know that by promising to destroy the system, they're getting these cynical youth to sign up. And when their parents and grandparents and other people in their lives go, you can't do this, this is going to destroy the economy. The kids are looking at the economy right now and going, good, destroy it. I don't care. I don't care if they're going to have to rob me to pay for it. They go, good, fine, rob you to pay for it. You're the one who said that you were able to, already pay for your house in college. I can't do that. So they don't care. They just want the promise. They were sold a false promise that if they just worked hard and went to college, everything would be fine. That's clearly false for the vast majority of them. And now they want revenge. What we are offering instead of revenge is an opportunity to dismantle the entire thing so that they and anyone coming after them doesn't have to go through this. So that, and it's not to say we're going to get rid of all colleges or anything like that, but we're going to dismantle a system that requires all this ridiculous degrees and licensing from state bodies who don't know how to do these jobs any better than I do. And instead allowing them to simply go straight to the businesses and trades and professions that they want to go in and learn how to do it at the feet of the people who are doing it until they are qualified enough by their peers who do that to then work and work fully and have that profession. And whether they get paid a small amount or they're working for free, what they're not doing is running up 6 figures and high five figures in debt in doing that. And you can apply that same argument to healthcare, to infrastructure, to defense, to medicine, to everything else. Remove the barriers, remove the government boot from the neck of the people and the market, set people free so that they can work together to make voluntary solutions that'll be far better than any arbitrarily determined, cynically enforced plan written by central planners to benefit themselves and their favored cronies.
If you're just joining us, you are on the Coalition, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, coalitionradionetwork.com, and of course at facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. If you're listening to this for the first time, we'd ask you to take a moment and follow us and like us on a variety of social medias. So Spike, let's even take it one generation a little bit older. The generation that is in the 30s, and this is this segment I'll call sort of proof of concept. Not only did they have to are they facing the corona collapse, if you will, but they were the first generation out of the gate post-2008, the super recession or the near depression, the banking collapse, call it whatever you want. So you've got two, if you will, once in a lifetime, once in a century crisis happening to one generation. Now, interestingly enough, a great deal of the growth in this party, particularly over the last 2 years, has been through a variety of caucuses. And a lot of those folks were some of the youngest members of what I'll call the Ron Paul generation, folks who sought and found a message of Ron Paul. And a great deal of Ron Paul's messages were particularly outrageous at the time because you didn't even have this last generation's approach to libertarianism. And yet, from that dynamic, sparked flights from the Republican Party based on how the Republican Party treated Ron Paul, which was to homogenize his message, diminish him, marginalize him, force him out of the convention spotlight that he, quite frankly, had earned. Ron Paul deserved to be on that convention stage. Interestingly enough, one of the most discussed candidates, if you will, that threatens to occasionally join us would be, of course, Willard Mitt Romney. And Willard Mitt Romney was almost single-handedly responsible for purging Ron Paul supporters out of Massachusetts. He became the poster child on how to plan to do that. So you've got a generation there who is now becoming active libertarians. And why I call that proof of concept is that, and a lot of them in a variety of ways are looking to take the party back to libertarianism. To me, that's proof of concept. To the folks who somehow accidentally discovered us, and I say that with love, but who managed to find us, despite sometimes our best efforts, mine included, all right, took the message of at that point in time, which was a fairly radical, non-mainstream message of Ron Paul, and embraced it, got excited by it, and took it to actually joining the Big L, the LP party, and are some of its youngest, most energetic adherents. Isn't that proof of concept?
It's proof of concept in two ways. One is proof of concept in the way that you said, that you can give a radical message where you are often booed. Let's be clear. When you give this kind of a message in those types of almost enemy circles, you're going to get booed. Mm-hmm. He still did it. And he made huge waves against an institutional attempt to stop him from even being able to say it in their spaces. And he still did it. And like you said, so that was a great proof of concept of bringing people out. It's also a proof of concept in how the Republicrats and the state in general deals with stuff. And that's not just the Republicrats. It happens in this party too. You get highly principled, honest, and radical people. And then, in the case of Ron Paul, you get Rand Paul. He's just like Ron Paul, except he's more electable. He's going to get up in the Senate, and he's going to say all the same stuff that Ron Paul did. We're going to have a Ron Paul in the Senate, guys. Let's all get behind Rand Paul. What did Rand Paul do? He went in. He gives good speeches. He's done some filibusters that he knew would fail. He's held up some laws that he knew would ultimately fail because he was the only one doing it. And any time his vote has been needed for the establishment to get things passed, he has folded in impressive fashion. Rand Paul is the Bernie Sanders of the Republican Party. And within the Libertarian Party, we have elements telling us that, no, we don't need to go with our really good platform that proposes a radical divergence from the current system, that promotes self-ownership over coerced action from the government. No, we don't need that. What we need is Rand Paul or Justin Amash or Thomas Massey or some, sexy liberty Republican to come in and, get us that 5% we need so we can start getting federal matching funds. What part of that is in our platform? What part of that is in libertarianism? What part of that has ever been said by any actual libertarian thinker or philosopher about the concepts of self-ownership and non-aggression? It's pure cynical politics. So the proof of concept goes both ways. There is a proof of concept of using radical messaging to bring people in and to get them inspired. And there's also a proof of concept of using this, whether you want to call it pragmatism or incrementalism or whatever you want to call it, to get people inspired long enough to see that all of their efforts were wasted on, a cynical attempt to get a seat at the table so that they can enrich themselves. And I got news for you. That's why we have so much burnout in the party. Because when you keep losing and don't even affect the conversation, you start to think that maybe all your time was wasted and that it's better to just go be an agorist and opt out of the state and engage in the legal direct action or whatever else and black and gray markets as opposed to trying to get people to vote for your party or join your party. That's a great way to burn people out. It's a great way to make people think that you're not being honest about your own platform, that you're using the platform to draw them in and to get them to work for you and to push politicians who don't support the platform. Taxation is not theft. We just need to replace this type of tax with a better type of tax. Government spending isn't expropriation from those with the least to those with the most. No, government spending just needs to be reworked around to be, more effective for a better style of government. Why are we saying that as libertarians? It's ridiculous. So no, it's proof of concepts both ways.
Incrementalism. How many? I'm not even sure how many letters that is, but it's an 8 or 9 or 10 letter obscenity to me. I respond to incrementalism by saying incrementalism is the devil. And for folks who've listened to the show before, be patient as I use my normal example. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of it. Here in Rhode Island, we had one of the earlier medical cannabis programs in the nation. It was well thought out, well articulated, and uncommonly commonsensical, if you will, for government, with no taxes or user fees really levied into it. It was simply a way to affect a distribution system to folks who needed medical cannabis, who needed that medicine, and it did so in a dignified way that took people off the streets and opened up, if you will, a market for it. So a lot of people supported it because, of course, that was there in mind the first window, that if the program worked well and behaved responsibly, because we need to be responsible, don't we? Like, if the program worked well, that would be a channel to legalizing recreational cannabis. And that, of course, would be then a channel to the ultimate objective, which is, are we ready for this? Legalize all drugs. Not pretend, not just the ones that are fun, but legalize all drugs, including methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, crack cocaine, and all the really nasty stuff. All right? Because as libertarians, that's what we've agreed on as a party. So ultimately, what did it become? The very people then who were given the market advantage by being able to be the groundbreakers, to open up that free market, if you will, and I'm using the terms loosely, all right, those folks, surprise, became the principal obstruction once they were gained a market monopoly by the state, once they were granted that, once they stood aside as taxes were introduced into it, and onerous user fees for folks who were literally in end-stage cancers and advanced neurological diseases. Once that happened and they had their position safe, guess who didn't want to open up recreational cannabis? Are we surprised by this? No, we're not. And so the notion that all of a sudden incrementalism, because it'll be safe, it'll be acceptable, people will embrace it, it won't be scary. Or in the words of a great Saturday Night Live comedian, wouldn't be prudent. So we've become the wouldn't be prudent party instead of the libertarian party. And I find that offensive. Because when I look upon the generations of libertarians who passed me, now I'm a guy who discovered libertarianism as an actual political movement too late in life. I wish I'd discovered this 20 or 30 years ago. Yes, I'm a recovering neocon. I volunteered for Richard Nixon in 1972. But, when I look at those people who have been with us so long, the fathers and mothers, if you will, of our political movement, who in the 1970s were made sport of because they would be the only ones in the audience who would embrace these concepts that you so accurately and beautifully described. I don't think they wanted us to become the wouldn't be prudent party after spending 23 or 30 years of their lives out in the wilderness trying to create a playing field so that folks now could take advantage of it and continue. I apologize for the sports cliches, but continue to move the ball forward. I don't think that was what they were planning. What was now considered radical, and I want your reaction to this, what is now considered quote unquote radical is actually libertarianism. Why do we have to accord the term radical, which is really nothing more than an accurately blunt, honest description of our philosophy? Why, I ask you, Spike?
Let's talk about definitional stuff here, because obviously the people picking these terms are the ones who are the gatekeepers of the party right now. So we are the radicals and they are the pragmatists. We are, and the messaging there is that we're the ones who just want everything our way or else we're not going to, play ball. And they're the ones who are trying to be reasonable, make effective changes. Let's be clear here. The so-called radicals, you and me and those who agree with what we're saying, are simply being honest about the platform. The platform says what it says. And it really does boil down to you own yourself, your life, your body, your labor, your property. No one should be able to take it. If you had to take all of the platform and boil it down into a single small sentence, that would be it. You own yourself, and therefore no one should be telling you or forcing you what to do, even and especially if it's a governing entity trying to say that they are doing that. And whether that means that we should have no government or just a very small government that is only funded and financed through voluntary fees, then so be it, but that's what we support. So anything less is either not being honest about our platform or saying that we don't agree with our own platform. Neither of those are attractive options for people that are looking for a potential third party. So that's what we call radicals. I would say it's radical to think that our failed strategy of presenting ourselves as the best parts of both major parties is going to suddenly start working. I think that's radical. Then we talk about incrementalism. Incrementalism implies that there's some incremental improvements. We've not seen that. We've seen the opposite, incremental worsening. And it's happening with us not even at the table because we haven't really done anything to affect the culture or the conversation. We haven't moved the needle. So I'm not sure we can call it incrementalism. Because what I'm proposing is making, bold statements and forcing the Republicrats to be on the defensive, so that we can actually see some incremental changes over time. That, in my mind, is incrementalism, is true incrementalism. Now let's talk about pragmatism. You can't call something pragmatism if it literally never works. The entire concept of pragmatism is that you are making necessary compromises in order to get, good short and medium term gains that make it worth making those compromises. We do nothing but compromise and get nothing for it. That's not pragmatism. That's fear of change. That's completely different from pragmatism. So we need to be more radical. We need to be more honest about our platform. The progressive big government left, and I shouldn't even say the left, the progressive big government people, the neocons, the neoliberals, the corporatists, they figured out a long time ago it doesn't matter what party is in charge or what politician wins the election. What matters is affecting the culture. What are people talking about? What are they demanding of their elected officials? What are they willing to tolerate from their elected officials and the people who rule over them? What are they willing to do to each other? These are all things that affect legislation. We've seen gun control get passed under Republicans. We've seen wars happen under Democrats. We've seen all of these things happen, and we've seen the government progressively grow incrementally, since we're using that term, over time, no matter who is in charge, to the point where at this point, it's a farce to even pretend there's a difference between the parties. That's why I call them the Republicrats. They are a single party that just wants to continuously grow and rob and steal and murder and put people in cages and commit mass murder around the globe and do all of the terrible things and run up endless amounts of debt that we and our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will have to pay back with interest. We know all of that. If we know all of that, why are we playing patty cake with them? And what the progressives understand is that it doesn't matter who's in charge, they get what they want because they affect the culture. Let's start affecting the culture. Let's actually start moving the needle at the cultural level, the Overton window, whatever cliche term you want to use. Let's start getting people to talk about what we want to talk about by presenting something so radical, so divergent, and so honest on our platform, but so divergent from what anyone else is proposing that people have to pay attention to it. They have to find out more about it. All these reasonable sounding people want this thing that I've never heard of before. And then you start talking to them and they realize, wow, I think I want this too. This makes perfect sense to me. That's how you grow a movement.
Right now, at this very moment in time, as we sit here, we've got sort of what I'll refer to as and I want to say this carefully, we are, in a sense, walking through a great human tragedy right now. The loss of life, I believe, when it's all over, is going to be stunning. But at the same time, because of a variety of cultural and legal and reasons, for whatever reason, we have an historic moment where we as a movement and a political party have the opportunity to grab folks by the scruff of their collar and get them and get a chance for them to listen. We do it politely. We follow the method where we plant seeds. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of folks who have an awful lot of time on their hands for all the wrong reasons, but they do. At the same time, when all the fundamentals that they've been preached to for their entire life have contributed to enormous loss of life, enormous loss of treasure, and enormous loss of futures. Folks are seeing the opportunities in their lives, particularly the 20 and 30 somethings, literally collapse before their eyes. You talk about nihilism. I mean, my God, I can't blame them. I mean, what are they going to be left with in 10 years? And it can be argued successfully that a great deal of that, not the disease itself, but the run-up to where government assumed tremendous responsibility in an invasive nature into people's lives, while simultaneously perverting the market so that folks who might have wanted to compete for space in that in order to provide the services that we have so desperately needed over the last few months have been unable to. So as I like to say in a moment like this, government owns this. They just do. They didn't cause it, but they own it. So we have got an historic opportunity to create a juxtaposition of both our cause, our passion, our nobility, and compare that to the failure of the very systems that these folks have been built up to trust in and believe in. What should we be doing differently as an organization right now? I'm not talking about in May. I'm not talking about in November. I'm not talking about during the quote-unquote campaign. What should we as a movement be doing right now to instill our belief system or represent our belief system to people who are literally crying out for change? What should we do?
Well, I think we should, first of all, we need to recognize, like you said, what we have in front of us. We have two silver linings to this terrible, terrible thing that's happening. One of them is that we have a literal captive audience that has much more time, like you said, to listen to what we have to say. The big thing that also happened, number two, is in the past, Republicans and Democrats, the Republicans used to be able to fill up stadiums with AstroTurf supporters and fill up large lobbies and conference rooms with supporters. And when they would give their speeches and rallies, they'd make sure that there was, several dozen or several hundred or even several thousand people behind them to give this sort of air of inevitability and prestige that, everyone was drawn to these people, that they were often just paying to be behind them and in front of them and cheering for them. Now we're all just schmucks sitting in front of our webcams. We've all been brought to the same level. We're all just sitting here talking to people on our webcam, or talking to people on our phone or whatever. It's because we are not supposed to be in large groups and we're supposed to be 6 feet or more away from others and not supposed to be cavorting with strangers any more than we need to. Joe Biden's just a guy in front of a camera. Donald Trump, when he's doing rallies, is just a guy in front of a camera. And that creates a very powerful, there is an implicit mental image that's being drawn there, where instead of them being up on these podiums with, adoring people around them and us just being in front of webcams or, with small groups of people, we're all looking the same now. And now we're all schmucks in front of webcams, but they're schmucks in front of webcams who caused all this to happen. They're now brought below us. And that is an incredible, incredible opportunity, but only if we know how to use it. Only if we have social media savvy. Only if we know how to do the production values to be able to present something that looks as good or better than what they're doing. Only if we bring a level of professionalism to what we're doing to be able to show that, we are a viable alternative. And then we have to actually present a viable alternative, or else, again, the voters are going to just hold their nose and vote for the safe, electable options because we aren't giving them enough of a reason to jump off the fence and join us. And we're definitely not giving enough of a reason to the people who don't even vote to jump off the fence and to join us. So those are the two incredible opportunities that I see that we have from all of this nightmare scenario that's playing out.
We've only got really a few months. That's when I talk to folks who espouse the wouldn't be prudent approach. I'm not sure what to say to motivate folks. You talk about windows. Our window is tiny. You know, and so, like you, I care not for the government's money. I would love the opportunity to burn that check on live TV, just to show folks what our actual motivation is. That's the only reason I want it, is to be able to rub it in their face. Maybe hand it out to a half a dozen purely anti-government organizations who are perhaps a little ruder than we are. That's my end game on that. But to take this time in this moment in history to blow up our message exponentially across the country, actually across the world. We are still, in large parts, despite our best efforts, we are an example to the world. You know, I'll go with that we're not the greatest free market in the world anymore, because we're surely not. But at this point, we need to take that message and bring it to as many places as possible. We need to be tireless. You know, there's a old-timey politician here, a guy named Vincent A. Buddy Cianci, who passed away a couple of years ago, one of the last great, if you will, boss-type mayors. And he would always joke about how he would attend the opening of an envelope. And, you know, and everyone chuckled, ha, ha, ha. But it's true. How far are we bringing the message? Are we proselytizing? Are we preaching to this? Are we breaking out of that suburb of our mind? Are we taking this beyond our comfort level? Are we taking this out of our bubble, you know, our little thought bubble, our little amen choirs? I'm not interested in pat on the backs right now. I'm interested in intense conversation. I'm interested in preaching, being an apostle of the libertarian movement to as many non-believers as possible, and finding a way to introduce it to them so that it's accessible and understandable and not terrifying, as some people in our very own movement would think. It's not terrifying. We're simply reaching out to the human spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit, the spirit of self-ownership that, quite frankly, generations ago was fought for both in Europe and here in the United States. It's really kind of a get back to basics, isn't it? I mean, is there anything groundbreaking that we're talking about right now, Spike, that is unique in human history? Any of it?
Unique? No, it's unique in that we're proposing doing it within this party right now, which is sad, because really all we're saying is, hey, you know that platform we have? Let's apply that and say that that's what we believe, because we are supposed to believe that. And it's sad that's you know, unique in our experience with this party. And we have people that have been on the ground and are now online that have been doing that all along, that have been pushing for that all along. Sadly, there have been some gatekeepers that would rather wait for, you know, some Republican or Democrat or you know, recent independent candidate to save us from ourselves by, you know, becoming the next Prague candidate to take one more tilt at the old windmill before, you know, losing in spectacular fashion and retiring from politics forever. We're trying to actually be the party that does what our platform says. So no, it's sad, and we need to go where people are. Now, right now, where everyone is online. And so we have been reaching out to, for example, Vermin and I spoke with Emerson University's Politics and Communication Division, their class. And we actually spoke. So it's interesting. We were speaking to a bunch of very, very, very left-leaning kids. These are kids that are going to a liberal arts, politics, and communication class. These are people that want to be politicians, public speakers, political operatives, reporters and editors and things like that. And they were very, 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 very left-wing. And their teachers and their one of the people that was on the call was the head of that department. They were left wing, but they were more like establishment Democrat left wing. Whereas the kids are ready to, pull out the guillotines and put people in the gulags and create their, anarcho-communist revolution and start, throwing Molotov cocktails in the whole spiel. And so we come in and give our disruptive message, and they were eating it up. They were loving it. And at one point, the head of the department says, well, but, if you look at what's going on with government, right, with this COVID pandemic and the lockdowns right now, how could anyone be a libertarian in these kind of conditions? And we said, actually, how can anyone be a Republican when the Republicans are who gave us this? How could anyone be a supporter and a defender of government when it was government who created the conditions for this thing to spread the way it has and are now overcorrecting by forcing us all to stay in our homes? After which time they will have done irreparable damage to people's livelihoods and well-being for countless of millions or tens of millions of Americans, and then they'll let us back outside and the thing will start spreading again, largely giving us the question of why they did it in the first place. How could anyone defend any of that? And the head of the department was absolutely gobsmacked because he probably never heard of such a thing. And the kids were, you can see on Zoom, you can see all the different windows. The kids are, clapping and cheering and eating it up. Probably because we're just giving it to their faculty, but also because we were speaking truth to power about a something that innately makes sense to all of us. And you have to go where people are, and you have to get that message. And if that is seen as groundbreaking, then it's sad that ground wasn't already broken. It's sad that we're not cruising along a trail that's already been set. And again, this isn't because of a failure of the activists, of the people on the front lines who've been pushing for petition drives and candidate vetting and getting candidates out there, so many of the candidates themselves. It's not their fault. It is two things. It is the structure of the state that is in place that makes it hard for them to even get a seat at the table, and of the corporate media and everything else. But it's also those within the party and within the movement who don't want us to be what our platform says it is, or at least not in any timeline where any of us are going to be alive. And those things are what burn people out. I know I said this before, but imagine you are an activist, you are pushing for these radical changes that are embodied and spoken of and manifest in our platform. And at every step, the people in charge of that party and of that platform are kind of obfuscating you and kind of making it difficult for you to be able to do that. And not even necessarily because they want to obfuscate you and they're bad actors. It's not that. It's that they believe that this so-called pragmatic, so-called incrementalist policy works, with all evidence to the contrary.
Right.
And it burns people out. It's why there's so much burnout. It's why people go from being absolute go-getters to saying, I'm not even going to participate in the next election cycle. And we need to change that by inspiring them and doing the morale boost of winning some down ballot elections, and also in bringing people into the movement and in sparking a change. Actually, the Ruff Phillips campaign called it reigniting liberty, and being that spark. Let's be that spark to reignite liberty.
To your point, this morning, I got a press release from an organization, if you will, an outgrowth of the local American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU chapter here, talking about a lawsuit that was filed in federal court to release some nonviolent offenders from holding cells in a private prison here in Rhode Island. Some of them drug-related, some of them immigration-related, given the near complete presence of COVID within those systems and the terrible situations that they found themselves in. Now, this is, we're not talking about some third country hellhole, as some people would describe it, not me. We're not talking about some Eastern European gulag, as someone people describe it, not me. We're talking about an American for-profit, publicly traded prison in Central Falls, Rhode Island. So I called one of the attorneys we have on my show here, the Coalition Radio. We have folks from the ACLU on all the time. In fact, if you go to coalitionradio.us and there's a civil liberties blog, you'll click on it and you'll see page after page after page after page of activism with the ACLU. So, but to the professor I was speaking with, who runs a legal clinic at a local law school, she sounds surprised to hear from me when I mentioned I was a libertarian. And I explained to her about our stance on borders, told her a little bit about the trip I always like to talk about, when Tom Mann and I and Dan did the Three Amigos thing down in Mexico last year, talking to folks who were trying to get over the border. When I started talking about our insistence on ending the war on drugs, when I started talking about the notion that we wanted to end people being caged, that many of us, myself, I am purely an open border person. Sorry if that offends anybody, but I am purely an open border person. I largely don't believe in borders. So when I'm explaining all this to someone who's probably arguably a very progressive lawyer running a legal clinic at a law school and a very articulate individual, she seemed astonished. And all I was doing was reciting chapter and verse, to your point, our platform. That's it.
Yep.
Nothing revolutionary, nothing shocking there. Well, this wasn't a case of somebody going off the reservation, and I was just speaking about some examples that we had done locally in fighting corporate cronyism, and we've had some successes here in this part of New England, and we're damn proud of them. So we wear them on our sleeve, and people listening to the show have to listen to them awful a lot. But they're just examples. There's no nobility there. There's no proof of ownership of concept. So it's just when it's that easy, Spike, and it really is that easy, just to simply be intellectually honest about where we are, and not be fraidy cats, as we used to say when I was little. There is an excitement that generates in not everybody. There are people who will be appalled by that. There are people who will be repelled by that. There will be embarrassed by it. But there's a certain percentage of people who will be attracted, will be driven to join us. And that's how you start not just a political party, but that's how you start a revolution. Simple stuff, isn't it, Spike?
Yeah, absolutely. And whatever percentage of people that will be positively affected by it will be higher than the number that will be positively affected by a message that we're going to make some moderate improvements here and there. But, when you say we're the best of the two existing parties and, we're going to make some changes here and there, the implicit message there is that the two parties that are currently in place aren't all that bad. They just need to have some structural reforms made, and then they'll be okay. Well, if that's the case, why am I voting for you? Why wouldn't I just vote for them and demand that they make these changes? You're not going to pull people out of an overwhelming narrative in this country that you either vote Republican or Democrat, or you're throwing your vote away. You're not going to fight it that way. You have to completely disrupt things, and you have to share a radical departure. And again, like we both keep saying, it's already in the platform. We don't even have to make something new. We just have to use what we already have. It's right there. Vermin Supreme has gotten so much flack for the fact that when people say, well, what's your platform? He says, my platform is the Libertarian Party platform verbatim. And they go, you can't do that. You can't just say that the party platform is your platform. Why? Why the hell would it not be that? I mean, it's one thing to say, I disagree, a little bit with this and a little bit with that. And I mean, there are certainly things that are in there that I don't think are quite as radical as I'd like them to be. But overall, I read that and I go, yeah, this is a good platform. I can go behind this. I can get behind this, and I can honestly spread this to people and speak to them empathetically. And I actually need to head out shortly, so I'll need to wrap up. But no, we need to be honest about our principles. And if we aren't, if it's that we think they're too scary, then maybe we need to examine if we really believe them or not. Because if I truly believe something, then I don't think the problem is that it's too scary. I think the problem is that people haven't heard it before. And there's a good way to solve that. Make them hear it. Then they'll have heard it. And maybe they react a little negatively the first time, but they've heard it. And now it's in there. And the next time they've already heard it. And the more they hear it, the less crazy it sounds, and the more it sounds like a narrative that they can actually get behind. So let's start inoculating them, for lack of a better word, to some of the visceral reactions they might get to it by actually sharing it with them. And let's present a viable alternative to the Republicrat machine of ever growing, growth of government in every aspect of our lives. A government that always grows constantly and perpetually growing in size, scope, power, and cost. Let's actually change things. Let's actually make an actual change at the cultural level, and eventually the electoral level, and eventually at the structural level.
Spike Cohen, he is the candidate for the Libertarian nomination for the vice presidency of these United States. Spike, first of all, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know this has been kind of something in flux for a lot of reasons that all week has been going on. So thank you for joining us and sticking with this, if you will, through thick and thin. Give us the rundown. Where can folks reach out to you? Where can they find you on the web? You're everywhere. You're ubiquitous, but at the same time, let's give folks a little direction right now. And also tell them about the Muddy Waters efforts that you guys do.
Sure, absolutely. So the best ways to reach me are on Twitter at I'm sorry, I got distracted because it said that the session had been ended, but we're connected by phone, so I apologize for that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the best way to reach me for my campaign is at Twitter at Real Spike Cohen, and then on Facebook. If you're searching on your address bar, it's facebook.com/literally Spike Cohen, or if you are looking in the actual Facebook search, it's Spike Cohen, your next VP. I'm also the co-owner of Muddy Waters Media, the co-host of the Muddy Waters of Freedom, and the host of My Fellow American. All that can be found on Muddy Waters Media on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Float, Periscope, pretty much every social media platform, and we're also available on muddywatersmedia.com. But my social media is for my vice presidential campaign is at Real Spike Cohen and facebook.com/literally Spike Cohen. And I'd love to hear from you.
Well, listen, first of all, I'm going to ask folks to stay tuned. We are going to go over, this is a relatively new setup here for the coalition. We've been here in this space for about 3 weeks. We do have a talk radio component. You'll see a phone number posted. I'll go through with you. But if you'd like to call in and make comments, questions, again, Spikes, thank you so much for joining us. And let's keep doing this. Let's keep this conversation alive. I believe, when you get past the issues surrounding the convention, which are critical, when you get past the issues of who's going to be this, who's going to be that, who's going to win this election, this is actually the argument and the conversation, the discussion that we as libertarians need to be having now. This is really represents, I think, the direction for the future of our movement. But again, Spike, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone that's listening, and everyone have a great night. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Stay tuned. Stay on the line right now, 401-205-3738. It's that simple. If you'd like to actually have a conversation with that, Spike did have to go. He had some commitments. Again, I'm grateful for him spending as much time as he did tonight. He's always been very accessible, very flexible about his schedule. He does embody that, and this is a compliment. He will attend the opening of an envelope if necessary, if in fact it means advancing the conversation, advancing the philosophy, advancing the cause. So 401-205-3738, if anyone would like to take a shot and actually getting involved in imagine this, a libertarian talk radio station. We're on here about 5-6 nights a week. We're, pre-COVID, this was supposed to be something a little bit different. Plans change. Things happen. So we found ourselves with a remote facility, so we've set up the apparatus necessary to engage in talk radio. 401-205-3738. So it's interesting because ultimately what we're talking about is a very different approach, I think, an unapologetic approach to the libertarian movement. And none of this is to denigrate the wonderful efforts of all the folks who are involved in the movement. I can have differences like this with people. I just firmly believe that right now we as a movement have to push forward. And you could do it positively. We all understand the SOP. We all understand the NAP. We all understand the platform. It's pretty clear. We're pretty good at platforms and stuff like that. The question is, how do we do in turning a public face to what our belief system is? And do we feel the need that we have to somehow apologize for it? I don't think we do. In fact, I'm convinced that we don't. I'm convinced, if you will, that right now at this very time, that we don't have to. So give us a call if you think it's worth a shot. Hey, if you disagree with me, that's fine too. It's okay. We can still be friends. I know, folks, the thing that we didn't talk about during that whole time was the message of ballot access. I know we didn't talk about that. Personally, I'm convinced that if we do it right, we can have both. And I know there's people who've invested a lifetime in ensuring that we get this 50-state ballot access. I saw firsthand how difficult, even with national level attention to our candidates in 2016, I saw how difficult that really was. Bear with me, as always, when you do something like this, you're tinkering with the tech. Just going to lean over here a second. There we are. I'm going to reflect some comments here, some pretty good stuff. Cameron says, how can anyone not be a libertarian after witnessing this pandemic? Cameron, this is why Spud Cohen, your next VP, is our next vice president. Nathaniel says, where's my main man, Vermin? Well, we're going to get him on. I've been talking with the campaign. This show works pretty hard to get candidates on. We had Ken Armstrong. We've got Mr. Phil Gray coming on. We've probably had about half the field so far. And we're going to work hard, particularly given the uncertainty surrounding the convention, to get folks as much airtime as they can. Alex Janikowski tells me, of course, it was 14 letters. Thank you for that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Absolutely appreciate that. I'm not that fast on the fly. You'll have to bear with me on that notion. So we are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media. What do I mean by outrage porn free? We absolutely will not entertain outrage porn here. And outrage porn here could be loosely defined as a set of, if you will, issues that appeal really just to emotions. Now, different issues are important to different people, and we recognize that. And we understand that. We embrace that. But at a certain point, arguing whether or not a Marine should be holding an umbrella for Barack Obama is not critical to the national conversation, while simultaneously the federal government is re-invoking vast parts of the Patriot Act. By the way, stick with us tonight on our main channel, and we are going to have a conversation with philosopher, writer, actress, adult entertainment producer Jesse Sage, and that's going to be around 11 o'clock. We'll go dark for about 15 minutes. That will only be on coalitionradionetwork.com, given the strictures applied to us by a variety of social media companies. The conversation will be adult. It will be political. It will talk about adult relationships. We're calling that segment Coalition After Dark. That's something we're going to try to do every Saturday, is have folks from a variety of movements surrounding human sexuality, human rights, and have a more mature conversation about it. That's going to be at coalitionradionetwork.com, and of course that will be at about 11 o'clock or so. Times are never absolute on social media. There's always tinkering to be done in terms of bringing people online. Super producer Joel here is gotten very, very good, very, very quickly at using our tech here to bring people in and offline. But interestingly enough, one of the biggest challenges is not getting viewers. We've gotten a lot of viewers to some of the shows we've had, sometimes in the thousands, and we're relatively new at this. The real challenge has been getting people to call in. And at 401-205-3738. And we're not sure why. Talk radio is a very powerful medium in the world of the Republican Party. Maybe because libertarians don't take talking points or instruction kindly from anybody. Yikes. We don't do that here. We have conversations. But we also, just for the sake of argument, you get to make your point fairly completely. Sometimes when there's a lot of people on the lines, we need to give you just a couple minutes. Sometimes when there's virtually no one on the lines, we give you all night. I think our record's about 45 minutes. Ken? Ken Molman has been nice enough to call in a couple of times when it's been quiet just to provoke the conversation, and we certainly appreciate that. And he and I are talkers, and he covers a lot of great ground. But I think he may hold the record for the single longest conversation. But again, for some reason, maybe it's a host. If it's a host, we're libertarians. We get to make fun of each other. But interestingly enough, for libertarians who are willing to argue on the Facebook, in chat rooms, for hours, are reticent, if you will, about doing it verbally. It won't hurt. I'd love to hear from you. You could tell me I'm full of horsepucky. That the concern for ballot access is so prescient and would be so damaged by us going full-blown libertarian that it would permanently damage the party. And there are people who posit that. And I'm not going to diminish their concerns. But if overwhelmingly we as an organization, as a philosophy, put together that ferocity, if you will, with regard to social media and all of that, then I think you would see a very, very different world. I believe you can get both. When I see the folks who are brought on to this movement, and let's look at the Mises Caucus, how successful they've been at bringing people into the party. Scoreboard. A lot of allegations are thrown their way. I think they're diplomatic about it. But ultimately, there's a lot of people who are attracted to the movement by people who are unabashedly, unapologetically, unwaveringly be libertarian. And we, need to be grateful for that, because new people bring in new energies and new ideas. And we also need to be able to engage in people. That means not driving them out because, my God, they're open border. They're actually willing to embrace that which is presented on our platform. And by the way, if you feel anything that I've said, or Spike said, or anyone says on this show is not representative of the platform, and you think the platform, we err when we say that, again, feel free to call in 401-205-3738. Again, at 11 o'clock, Jesse Sage, Coalition After Dark. Only available on coalitionradionetwork.com. By the way, we don't sell tickets to any of this. This effort is done from the support of donors and sponsors. We always put out the call, too, particularly during COVID. If you've got a business that you're somehow finding a way, hook and crook, what's the term, adapt, improvise, and overcome, finding a way to keep them open at some level, and you want to promote that, any type of business. Any type of business. Even if it's, a little Slim Shady. Call us and feel free to tell us about it. We'll sign off here, and unless we get a lot of phone calls, probably in about 10 or 15 minutes. But Spike Cohen was good enough to join us. You'll be able to find the labeled conversation here on the Coalition Radio Facebook page at facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. You'll be able to find that conversation. You can listen to it. We're a little bit behind. That's me. In getting a lot of stuff up to the YouTube channel, but we'll be working on that tomorrow and on Monday. Like many of you, I find myself unemployed. Yep. The not so silent hand, the not so hidden hand of government decided that if you happen to sell trucks for a living, you got to go home. So for the first time really in my life, I'm on the dole. I'm on the teat. I get my government kiss and, well, the electronic mail once a week. And as a true libertarian, if the government wants to give me money, I figure I got a long way to go with my life to get all the money back that they've stolen from me. So yes, that is a really apt way of me rationalizing the fact that yes, I will accept it on a personal level. But to Spike's comment on the 5% nationally and they get the revenue sharing, nah, I'm all set. I'm on the mind that we burn the check live on the air and then file for a replacement check and donate it to some great libertarian organizations that are simply out there helping people in times of need, voluntarism. What is it that Cajun Navy, that Libertarian Navy, a libertarian relief effort that some folks have, started doing during and after Katrina and have tried to leverage it? Okay, let's give the money to that. Or if you think we should just turn it down outright, you can call us at 401-205-3738. Tell us what you think. Again, 11 o'clock tonight, Jesse Sage joins us. We talk about the political issues, philosophical issues surrounding the sex worker movement. We're taking it off the Facebook and off of social media just because we don't want to get zucked. We also asked people if they could to watch us at coalitionradionetwork.com. And the reason for that is we live in mortal fear of the day when, all of us get sucked. I realize that as a movement, we're a Facebook-driven movement. We're a social media-driven movement. I think everyone with a media presence needs to rethink that. There are some great folks. I don't see anyone in this movement as my competition. I see them as my brothers and sisters. If you've got a effort going on, a podcast, a blog, a video blog, streaming TV, and you want to promote it, reach out to me. There is strength in numbers. Imagine an election where we can actually bring all the libertarian-related media, indie media, regardless of its size, its quote-unquote professionalism. By the way, I'm offended by that. There were a couple of folks who seemed to think it was great to rag on folks who had started a blog or some type of video effort, and the approaches weren't always as professional or high level as some of them thought appropriate. Now, a lot of these people have never done that. I can tell you from personal experience that the sheer volume, the sheer effort that is involved in doing a broadcast like that, writing like that, every week, week in, week out, is enormous. The complexity of booking guests. We thought we were going to have an event tonight that we started asking people about a couple of weeks ago. And let's just say a lot of those folks got back to us literally in the last 12 hours to not be able to do it. which we understand. Listen, God grant me the serenity to accept that which I cannot change. We wish they'd gotten back to us a little sooner, but what's the word? Equanimity. Right, yeah, there you go. That's the ticket. We accept that. And they're still our friends. And we hope to have a lot of programming this week coming up dedicated to the presidential and to all the elections. Because this information is disseminated not just towards libertarians, but it's also sent to, as we affectionately refer to it, as the normies. So we try to get people to listen in who might not be part of the Libertarian Army, might not even be small L's, never mind the big L's. So we're all about communication. A couple of efforts that I do here. If you'd like to participate in, please let me know. If you're a candidate, please let me know. We've got interviews available here. And we're a safe space for folks who are for candidates. We're not looking for gotchas. We're looking for conversation. So feel free. Feel free. 401-205-3738. So, in about 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to bring this down. Again, coalitionradionetwork.com is our website. You can see in same glorious living color our loft space here in the bunker, high above the Providence Hills. You can't see them, but in the background are Dick Cheney and Spiro Agnew hanging out in the green room. Did we re-jump the signal here? Is that what happened? Folks are coming back online. Every now and then the signal gives out. Not sure what happened there. But we'd love if you had a chance to listen to Spike. If you didn't comment, please do. We try to address all those comments. So, $11 tonight, Jesse Sage will be joining us on the Facebook. Sorry, not on the Facebook. Forgive me. Only on the stream at coalitionradionetwork.com. The reason why we're insisting on that is, of course, if the conversation turns adult for us, which it probably will, we not run afoul of the YouTube, Periscope, and Facebook rules and regulations. So I think on that note, it's time to bring the signal down. We're going to be off the air for about a half hour. And at this moment in time, I'd like to thank again Spike Cohen for joining us. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/the Coalition Radio. On the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And, of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us. Our civil liberties blog, I believe, is worth going to just for the rolling back all the issues, the discussions. Some programming notes. We'll be live at noon tomorrow. We'll put this all up on our pages and all that. We'll share it as normal. I think there's a measurable part of my day that I spend on the Facebook just sharing stuff. Tomorrow at noon, we're going to be focusing on locally here in Rhode Island on an issue that I believe has national ramifications. The American Civil Liberties Union has filed suit against a for-profit prison here in Rhode Island about the conditions and the nature of the incarceration of nonviolent offenders and their proximity to the being infected with the COVID-19 virus. Or as a certain assistant to our president, Orange Cheeto, said, there was COVIDs 1 through 19. And we've been here for a while. You had your first 18 COVIDs. Oy. So at noon, we'll start interviews with local activists in the ACLU about that issue, a core issue, because ultimately these folks who have been incarcerated are low-level drug offenders, and there's folks with immigration issues. So join us then. And then tomorrow night, more Open Talk Radio. Imagine, Libertarian Talk Radio. Anybody can call about any issue from any political background, but the host here looks at these issues through a libertarian perspective. So anyway, join us at 11 o'clock at coalitionradionetwork.com if you could. We'll see you then. Have a good night.